I am feeling like there's a big door that's ready to open. And I'm gonna open it.
I feel like I've been in a dark room stumbling around looking for something and not knowing there was a door. This is something that I'm going to reflect on because I know that I can't continue without that door.
I am determined to deal with things that I have not dealt with well in my past. I feel like this is just going to help all that.
We are more than our thoughts. Our mind is more than our thoughts. When we stand in that space between thoughts, when our mind is in that state, it's saying, I'm open to learning something new. And then I hear something. Something emerges from the nothing. Something emerges from nothing. We witness something come to mind where nothing was there before, except in the body, in feelings, your true self-freedom.
I'm hoping for a little guidance for us with everything that happened on Tuesday in Uvalde, Texas. And not only are the thoughts of the children and the suffering and the hesitation and so much, so many thoughts are spewed, and the web of it just feels sticky and threatening. And I read somewhere, a colleague, I may have posted this as a message to remind us that, we don't um, undervalue the experience of what happened by escaping it for a time. But it's almost impossible to escape. And I wonder, is this true self time? Um, can it become, is it something you have to limit or, um, sorry, I'm trying to word it the way. It's not really an escape, but could it become an escape? I think I'm trying to reason it when it's unreasonable. Um, I think I hop in there often when I'm uncomfortable or scared or looking for a response that I'm expected to give to either a congregant or a sibling or my spouse. But I find I'm going there for respite from the world, maybe to hide, because there's just so many hard things happening right now. How do we best use this place? Is it an altar? Is it a tool? Is it both and more?
The American people, for the most part, are a traumatized people. And it's easy to imagine the trauma if you think of the following scenario. An announcement goes out to the citizens. every person who is left-handed will be arrested and have the left hand cut off. So all the right-handed people begin to think that they have right hand privilege. The privilege of not being tortured in a particular way, which induces trauma. So we're acting like right-handed people who are in a traumatized situation and feel threatened. Gosh, if they can cut off a left hand, will they cut off my X because it doesn't conform? So outrage shows up, anger shows up, panic shows up, fear shows up repeatedly as signals to the self and the world of trying to protect itself from an unknown thing, which is that this country is not very supportive of most of its people. It's a continuum, but medical care, health care, schools, jobs, retirement, we're at the bottom of the lot when it comes to the developed countries. So when a kid shows up or an adult shows up gunning down children or co-workers, or road rage turns into roadkill, we know that people are very, very angry. They're traumatized. And we have not developed an adequate vocabulary to explain why so many people, not just Black people or brown people or red people or yellow people or Jewish people, but white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, Irish, German, European background, why are so many of them unhappy? The American people, for the most part, have been taught to think of what they do not have happen to them as a privilege, as opposed to simply one way their human rights are not violated. Why are so many people outraged? Why are so many Americans outraged? When I was perhaps 5, maybe younger, I was frowning. And my mother took my hand and took me into the kitchen, found a small brown paper bag, partially inflated it, then put the mouth of the bag to my mouth and said, blow into the bag, which I did. Now the bag was fully inflated. With one hand, she held the bag over her head, and with the other, she burst it, which made a loud noise, and she said, "Grouch gone." I thought it was so funny, and I thought she was a magician because she could make grouches go away. Grouch gone. Meanwhile, my mother, who was an artist, all of her figures in sculpted were faceless, and all of her paintings were of sorrowful people. But whenever I frowned, she used the Grouch Bag until within a year or so, I always smiled. My senior year at the university, I swallowed 40 sleeping pills, thinking that I would simply fall asleep, not knowing that I would drown in my vomit. When I aspirated, which was not on my scenario, part of my plan, after going around my dorm room for, I don't know, 20 seconds or something like that, trying to clear my lungs, I cleared my lungs, and then I ran to the student healthcare center, afraid that this might happen again. My stomach was pumped, and I was sent to a recovery room where I spent the night. In the morning, I went back to my dorm room, took off the sheets from the bed, washed the floors, cleaned up all the vomit, and then I walked across campus. And an acquaintance I knew came up to me and said, "You're always smiling. Why are you so happy? It's just wonderful to see." And I simply smiled broadly and went on. It took me years to know that I had lived in a traumatic environment and that I was a trauma survivor. I was either smiling or screaming, pleasant or outraged.
The minute you started talking about blowing the grumpy into the paper bag, and then you only smiled, and then you only had smiling face or rage, that's it. We have been trained to blow into the bag and have it be the other way. This is President Lyndon Johnson said that if you give one poor white man someone to look down on, you can pick his pocket. Hell, he'll pick his pocket for you, meaning that capitalism will work as long as someone has someone else to look down on. And that is blowing the grumpy, blowing the low wage, the bad labor, the bad healthcare, the bad infrastructure into a bag and then popping it. And everyone's like, oh, look at, we're the best country in the world. Ta-da. And then we find ourselves either filled with rage or filled with fake happiness.
Yes, yes. And it's not capitalism per se, but it's unfettered greed, which is different from capitalism. It's uncontrolled greed. So, yes, it's the grumpy bag, the grouch bag. So when we go to Uvalde, where a third of the people live on or below, at the poverty line or below it, instead of saying, as the head of NRA said when asked to, in his opening speech for the convention in Houston, the National Rifle Association, he said, well, there are family issues and this and that. And he says, and also it's just an inexplicable evil. I think trauma. I want to know the immediate household environment, the immediate community environment, the immediate environment of the country. Tens of millions of people are traumatized by the lack of care and attention in the country, in their communities, and in their families. So, the work that we are doing, our peak experiences, our true self, give us the space to stand in that space between thoughts. As we're taking in all the suffering, feeling it, cradling it, holding it, and looking for ways to lessen the pain for everyone. What we are doing is creating the space so that you can see the suffering. In that space, you want to know how the gunman suffered and what can be done to ease the suffering in a community so that it's not producing more of these people, which expands all the way out to the entire United States, the kind of things we can work on together, whether we're Republicans or Democrats, nonpartisan ways. Uvalde is another example of traumatized souls. Outrage does not come out of nothing. Our politicians, Republicans and Democrats, focus on the outrage. And intentionally or unintentionally, they feed it. We are a traumatized people, which means we have to pay attention to the settings which created trauma.
I have two things. One is to ask you a personal question, if you feel like sharing with us about what did you think swallowing 40 pills would do for you? The second thing is, as you said, that the politicians in our country, the leadership, quote unquote leadership, focuses on the outrage. I feel like there is a concerted effort where they're blowing up the bag and making us put a grumpy in the bag and, Grouch gone, blowing it up again, and just constantly hitting a reset button. So I'm not sure they're as focused on our outrage as much as they want us to stop being outraged. So get the grumpy gone kind of thing. I don't know. That's just my opinion. But the other thing about, what do you think would have been solved, in that situation?
Okay, good. The 40 sleeping pills, as I took the swallow of the 40 sleeping pills, and wasn't bad, my bed, around midnight. And I simply thought that I would fall asleep and never wake up. I imagined my parents standing at my gravesite and mourning and crying. And I felt really good. I had no idea that I hated them, that I disliked them, that I was angry toward them. But I felt good that they would feel so wretched. And then after having that thought and that vision of them standing by my gravesite, I realized I wouldn't be there to see it, and I was sorry about that. Trauma victims the brain, when the nervous system is overwhelmed in this way, an extremely unpleasant way, an unbearable way, the brain focuses attention on what it has to do to get the body out of harm's way. So it shrinks down the size of the cell to its tiniest possible size so that it can survive. And then it looks around for someone to depend upon to ease the pain. And that's the abuser. And the abuser becomes the savior. So the patterning principle is, gosh, if I can make friends with the abuser, then maybe the pain will end. Then you carry that model through life. because the brain has figured out a way to survive in a toxic environment. Depend on your abuser and treat your abuser as your savior. The American people, for the most part, are traumatized people. Its government is not taking care of them in the way that other developed countries are taking care of their people. And yet, we believe that we're better off than virtually anyone else in the world. So we're acting like right-handed people who are in a traumatized situation and feel threatened. Gosh, if they can cut off a left hand, will they cut off my X because it doesn't conform? Anger shows up, panic shows up, fear shows up. We know that people are very, very angry. They're traumatized. What are we doing? We're finding a place through this kind of work to stay fully present to the suffering of others and to look for the sources of that suffering, to get rid of the grouch bag. Why is this kid unhappy? Now we're compassionate beings, setting out to heal and transform the world from a place of love and compassion, because we're suffering too. And we know how to handle suffering because we have learned how to handle and acknowledge our own suffering.
That's bubbling up tears for me. That we know our own suffering and that we're using it to become compassionate. In my sermon today, I mentioned that young man. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, the shooter. I see his face, but I can't remember what his name is. I'd like to use it, but I don't have it in my mind right now. I did read about him and what his life experience was like. It's not shared in a lot of places, but today we talked about our imagining our goal, our passion for our community is to offer the things that maybe he needed. I said, let's be the place that would have helped him. So this is very affirming about that. But addressing our own traumas, acknowledging them and going toward them, and peeling them open to not just search for meaning and truth, or to not to just be responsible seekers of truth and meaning, but to actually find some and create our own. To stop searching and just create it. But addressing that trauma and saying that that's what it was. Whew. No more grouch bag. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
I think I instinctually knew that, I asked when this happened, what was the pain? What is it that causes somebody to feel so hurt that they in turn hurt others? They lash out and hurt others. And I knew there was pain there, but nobody wants to talk about that. It's they want to make, he was a bad guy. He was, in the case of the one in Buffalo, he's a racist. nobody wants to talk about the pain behind the people that do this. And so we can't have those conversations, but I think we need to really push those conversations. We can't just write it off with, a label and that's it, because it's not working.
We are being quite courageous when we say, this is not working. It's not working. Which means that, hey, what I am doing is not working. So how do I change my strategy? How does my true self take over? How do I stand in the place between thoughts and exude compassion and care? Let's focus on your homework assignment, and then we can have final thoughts and feelings. And the homework assignment has the following framework. When I saw the movie, watched the movie Gandhi now fully involved in his social justice work and his attempt to free his people from the colonial power. Moved into a camp, and now he was dressed like a elite and untouchable. And he explained to his wife, a Brahmin, the routine for the camp, which is that everyone would take turns cleaning the latrines, the hole in the floor. And she said, what? You expect me to clean the latrines of the least of anyone? And she was so outraged that Gandhi became outraged, and he pushed her, he shoved her. And seeing what he had just done, he felt absolute remorse. And she stepped toward him. And she said, Gandhi, you do not understand. Some of us do not even aspire to have your ideals. Some of us do not even aspire to have your ideals. Your homework assignment for this week is to do something that you have aspired to do for a very long time. It has to be something tiny, manageable, and it has to be so tiny that if you don't do it, you'll feel shame and remorse because you can do it. Right? It's like wash the floor, okay? So choose something that you have aspired to do for a very long time. And your homework assignment is to do it. Where are you now? What's going on? What are you thinking about? What are you feeling? If I've asked the wrong question, please answer the right one.
I feel like I've learned to blow my trauma into a bag and pop it myself, and it disappears. And some of this work that we're doing has brought that to light. And so that's interesting. Not sure what word to put there, but interesting is the word I'm thinking of.
I always feel so much gratitude for this time. Just the shift in that space. It's very centering and encouraging and affirming. So thank you.
I feel gratitude as well. And Deika, thank you so much for sharing some of your personal experiences. And I feel like things are making sense. I can see the connections, almost see the way through the things that in our busy world we don't focus on. We don't stop. And what is required is that we stop and pay attention. Um, so thank you for bringing that to us.